Denise stood in the street with her phone raised like I'd just committed an offense, staring at my driveway like it didn't belong to me. "I need you to move your vehicle," she said, sharp and absolute. "You can't park there. That's HOA roadway, emergency access." I already called a tow truck. I told her calmly that it was my driveway. "She didn't care if you don't move it right now," she said, steady and certain. "I'm calling 911. What Denise didn't understand, what she never bothered to verify, was that the only thing that mattered in that moment wasn't her. HOA rules. It was ownership, because this wasn't just a parking dispute. It was a private road inside a polished neighborhood, maintained by assumption, enforced by confidence, treated like HOA property for years. Homes, fees, budgets, entire policies built on the belief that nobody would ever pull the deed. That's what overreach looks like in an HOA. It doesn't start with law. It starts with entitlement, and it keeps expanding until it meets records, in minutes after. Denise called 911. The HOA didn't just lose the argument, they lost the road. But let me start from the very beginning. The road I live on doesn't look unusual at first if you drive in from the main entrance. You see what everyone expects in an HOA community? Fresh asphalt, trimmed medians, identical mailboxes, tidy lawns with edges sharp enough to cut paper. It looks planned. It looks controlled. It looks like the kind of place where someone will leave you a note if your trash cans are visible for more than an hour. But if you keep driving, past the model-perfect streets, past the monument sign, past the areas where landscaping always looks suspiciously expensive, the neighborhood starts to change. Subtly, the pavement gets older, rougher in spots. Patchwork seams from repairs done long before the HOA started, sending newsletters about community pride. There's no city street sign on my corner. No reflective post with a clean metal nameplate. Just a fading marker stuck in the ground years ago like, "Here, this is what we call it." And even though this road sits inside the neighborhood, it doesn't feel like the HOA owns it. It feels like the HOA just decided it did. My house sits at the end. Not fancy, not huge. A modest place, with a driveway that's mine, and has been mine since the day I signed the papers and the keys hit. My palm. I bought it because I liked the quiet, because it felt tucked away. Like I could live in a neighborhood without living under a microscope. Most days, it's exactly what it was, until the day I parked in my own driveway, and watched a grown woman threaten me like I was trespassing on my own life. It was a normal afternoon. Sunlight warm enough to feel like spring was pushing its way in. The air smelled like fresh mulch. Lawnmower hummed somewhere down the block. Pulled into my driveway the way I always did. No hard acceleration, no loud music, no look at me behavior, just a car returning home. I was halfway out of my seat when I heard the voice. Sharp. Hi. Certain. Excuse me. I looked up. A woman was marching toward me like she'd been waiting behind a curtain, phone in her hand. Already pointed at me, not casually, not like someone texting, like she was collecting evidence, oversized sunglasses, bright jacket that looked too expensive to be practical, hair done in that stiff, deliberate way that says, "I get ready to be seen," and her posture said she wasn't approaching as a neighbor. She was approaching as enforcement. "I need you to move your vehicle," she called. Out. I paused with my car door open, one foot on the driveway. "Move it?" I said. "Yes," she snapped, lifting her phone higher. "Can't park there." I glanced down at the driveway, then back at her. "This is my driveway," said calmly. She didn't even blink. "No, it's not," she said like she was correcting a child. "This is HOA roadway. That's a fire lane. Emergency access. You're blocking it." I looked behind me. The road was empty. Wide enough for 2 cars to pass. No hydrant. No. Fire lane. Strange, sure. No painted curb. Just asphalt and quiet. "I'm not blocking anything," I said. "I'm parked on my property." Her jaw tightened. She stepped closer and pointed at my concrete like it was lying to her. "There's an HOA rule," she said slowly, like I was hard of hearing, "that you cannot park in driveways. Vehicles must be in the garage. It's a community standard. I stared at her. An HOA rule, I repeated, that says I can't park in my driveway. Yes, she snapped. It's about appearances and emergency access. Logic didn't matter. What mattered was that she believed. She had the right to command, and she was enjoying it. She tilted her phone toward my license plate. Then she announced it like punishment. Already called a tow truck. That made me pause. Not from fear, from disbelief. You called a tow truck, I repeated. Yes, she said, because you people keep doing this. You people. The phrase was small, but it landed heavy, like she'd been waiting for a target. Closed my car door gently and rested my hand on the roof. Still calm, ma'am, I said. I live here. This is my driveway. I'm not moving my car. Her face twisted, offended not by my words, but by the fact I hadn't accepted hers as law. I'm on the HOA board, she said quickly. There it was, the religion board. As if it came with badge. And handcuffs, I don't care, I said plainly. This is my driveway. She took a breath and raised her voice just enough for Windows to hear. You are refusing a lawful HOA directive, she declared. You're violating fire access. And if emergency services cannot get through, you will be responsible. I looked around. No one else outside. But I could feel the quiet attention behind curtains, that HOA-trained instinct to watch conflict like it's entertainment. I kept my voice low. Emergency services can get through, I said. And I'm not moving. She held her phone closer, recording me deliberately. Say it again, she demanded. Say you refuse. I didn't take the bait. I just said it like a fact. I'm parked in my driveway. That's when her confidence turned sharper. She smiled tight. Okay, she said. Great. Then she lifted her phone like a weapon. If you don't move your vehicle right now, she said clearly, I'm calling 911. For a second, I just stared. Because there are threats that are silly, and threats that reveal someone's real relationship with power. Calling 911. Because someone is parked in their own driveway isn't petty. It's madness that only exists when someone has never been told. No, I took a slow breath. Then I said the only thing that made sense. Go ahead. Her head snapped back. What did you say? I said go ahead, I repeated calmly. Call 911. She looked stunned, like she expected. Fear and got permission. Then she did it. Right there. On my driveway. Phone on speaker like a trophy. I heard it ring as she stared at me, smiling wider now, sure the police were about to arrive. And remove me like a criminal, the operator answered. 911, what's your emergency? The woman spoke fast, excited, almost joyful. Yes, hi, I need police dispatched immediately. There's a homeowner blocking emergency access and refusing to comply. He's parked illegally and he's being aggressive. Aggressive. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't moved toward her. I hadn't done anything except exist on my own land. But to people like her, disobedience is aggression. I stayed silent and watched her perform. When she ended the call, she looked at me with a satisfied smile. They're on their way, she said. I nodded once. Okay, I replied, and for the first time, she seemed confused by my tone. I wasn't panicked. I wasn't pleading. I wasn't negotiating. I was standing there like someone who knew something she didn't, because I did. Inside my house, in a drawer I almost never opened, was a thick packet. From my closing, deed records plat, Maps County filings, stuff most homeowners never read again after signing. But I had read mine, because this road had always felt off, older, unclaimed, like the HOA inherited control, through assumption instead of ownership. And when I looked it up back then, what I found made me pause. I hadn't expected to need it, but I remembered it now with perfect clarity. I looked back at the woman standing in the street, arms folded, smiling like she'd just won in her mind. Once law enforcement arrived, my driveway would stop being mine. It would become hers. HOA, jurisdiction, HOA power. She stood there waiting, phone ready, eyes bright with the thrill of escalation. And I stood beside my car, quiet and steady, thinking the same thing as the minutes passed. You really don't know what you just stepped into, because when the police arrived, this wasn't going to become a story about HOA rules. It was going to become a story about jurisdiction, and she'd just called 911 onto land the HOA never owned in the first place. She didn't wait for the police like a concerned citizen. She waited like a person who'd ordered a service, like she expected a uniform to pull up, take one look at her, and turn my driveway into a courtroom. While we stood there, she paced the edge of the road with her phone in her hand, narrating the situation loud enough for the windows. This is exactly what I mean, she said, sharp and performative. This is a safety hazard. You can't have this. She glanced from window to window as she spoke, like she was addressing the neighborhood jury. This homeowner thinks he can do whatever he wants, she continued. Well, not in this community. I didn't argue. People like that don't want a conversation. They want a stage. So I stayed quiet, leaning lightly against my car. Gosh, she didn't like that. She wanted me angry. She wanted me to give her something that matched the story she'd told 911. Instead, I held my phone down at chest level and recorded the scene. My driveway me caranned her standing in the street with her camera aimed like a weapon. Then she started recruiting. A garage door opened 2 houses down. A man stepped out, hands in pockets, scanning the situation like he was deciding whether to get involved. The HOA woman turned instantly, switching to a sweeter tone. Hi, she called out. It's just so you know I called 911. There's an emergency access issue. The man looked toward my driveway. Then the empty road, no painted curb, no signage, just quiet asphalt. He didn't argue. He didn't agree. He just slowly retreated back into his garage like the whole thing smelled wrong. That should have embarrassed her instead. It energized her, because the HOA doesn't need agreement. It needs attention. She kept pacing, tossing out words like she was reading from a script. Safety violation. Tow authorization. Emergency access. And then her phone buzzed. She looked down, smiled, started typing fast. Right there on the street. Thumbs moving like she was filing a report in real time. A minute later, my phone buzzed. An email from the HOA compliance address. Already subject line. Notice of violation, parking, emergency access. Interference stared at it, not because I didn't expect the HOA to move quickly, but because it landed before the police even arrived. The first line read like a courtroom statement. This notice serves as formal documentation of an observed violation. They listed the accusations in bullet points like certified truth, unauthorized, driveway parking interfering with emergency access, failure to comply with HOA directive, and below the bullet points, the ladder started. They always have a ladder. Fine begins immediately. Tow authorized attorney review pending lien consideration if non-compliance continues. Felt that familiar pinch in my chest the one homeowners feel when an HOA starts turning home into paperwork. Not rage, not fear exactly, just the sudden awareness that someone is trying to turn your life. I looked up from the email. She was watching me with satisfaction. See, she said brightly. System working. Then she stepped closer to my driveway and announced it like she was proud. I told you. Tow truck's already on the way. I didn't answer her. I looked at the street again. Still quiet. Still empty. And the ridiculousness of it pressed against the moment. Calling 911. Issuing violations. Threatening liens. All because a car was sitting in a driveway. But with HOAs, it's never about the car. It's about submission. And she wanted it badly. A few minutes later, tow truck rolled into view. Big white rig, amber lights flashing softly. It came down the road slow, careful, like the driver already sensed this. Wasn't normal. The HOA woman's face lit up like Christmas morning. There, she said, pointing. The driver climbed out and looked around with the expression of a man who'd been dragged into something he didn't trust. He walked toward me with a clipboard of his own before he could speak. The HOA woman cut in fast. He's in violation. She said, unauthorized parking. Emergency access interference. Tow is authorized. The driver nodded once like he'd heard versions of this before. Then he looked at me. Vehicle belongs to you? He asked. Yes, I said calmly. He glanced at the driveway, then at her. Where's the tow authorization? He asked. Her smile hardened. It's HOA authorized, she insisted. We control the road. The driver didn't look impressed by titles. Do you own the road? He asked. That made her blink. That's irrelevant, she snapped. He didn't move. He asked again. Who owns the road? Her tone rose. The HOA does, she said sharply. We enforce the community. The tow driver's eyes flicked to me, then back to her. Ma'am, he said carefully, I don't hook cars unless I have clear authority. I need written tow authorization, and I need to know who owns the property. The HOA woman stared at him like he'd betrayed her. You're contracted, she said. I'm not risking my license, he replied. Calm and firm. That's when I finally spoke. Not to argue, just to put reality back on the table. You don't tow cars from property you don't own, I said. The HOA woman turned on me instantly. Oh my God, she mocked. And she keeps saying that. You don't get it. This is HOA property, HOA road, HOA jurisdiction. I didn't smile. I didn't smirk. I just looked at her evenly. Then prove it, I said. And that's when the siren chirped at the end of the street. Not blaring. Just one controlled burst as a patrol. A car turned into our section. The HOA woman's posture changed immediately. Shoulders back, chin lifted. Like a general watching reinforcements arrive. She adjusted her sunglasses and put on her most righteous expression. The patrol car rolled up and stopped. An officer stepped out. Not rushed, not aggressive, just calm. Radio murmuring faintly as he took in the scene. Tow truck HOA woman filming me beside my car. The officer approached. Eyes flicking once to the curb, no markings, then to the driveway. All right, he said. What's going on? The HOA woman launched in instantly. This. Homeowner is blocking emergency access, she said. He refused to comply. He's being aggressive. It's non-compliant. Tow authorized. The officer listened. No reaction. Then he turned to me, sir. I spoke calmly. I'm parked in my driveway, I said. She called 911 then. Call the tow truck. The officer looked at the driveway again, then at the empty road, and I watched his expression shift. Not anger. Quiet confusion. The kind a professional gets when the story doesn't match the scene. Then he looked back at the HOA woman and asked the one question that drained the confidence out of the air. Who owns this road? The HOA woman froze, lips parting slightly, blinking behind her sunglasses like her brain had to reboot, because in her mind, ownership didn't matter. Only authority did, and now the one authority she couldn't intimidate had asked a question that required a real answer, not a title, not a clipboard, not a rule book. Proof, and I stood there beside my car, silent, steady, watching her realize too late that this wasn't going to. And with me being removed, it was going to end with her being exposed. The officer didn't ask the question like it was a trap. He asked it like it was step one, like he'd dealt with enough neighborhood disputes to know that everything people argue about, parking, noise, rules, access, always comes down to the simplest thing. Who owns what? The HOA woman tried to answer him with confidence instead of evidence. The HOA owns it, she said quickly. We maintain it, we enforce it, it's a community road. The officer didn't nod. He didn't accept her tone as proof. He just looked at her and repeated it, calmer. Do you have documentation showing the HOA owns this road? She hesitated. That hesitation was small, but it told the truth, not because she didn't know the answer, because she'd never had to know the answer. People like her operate on assumption. They build authority by repeating it until everyone agrees. Not to question it, but law enforcement doesn't work on agreement. It works on records. The tow driver stood a little straighter, relieved the decision was no longer his problem. I stayed calm. Then I said, "Officer, I can show you the deed." That got the HOA woman to snap her head toward me. "No, you can't." She barked. The officer looked at her. "Ma'am." He said, "Let him speak." That was the first shift, because to her, he was supposed to say, "Yes, ma'am." Instead, he said, "Let him speak." I turned toward my front door. "My documents are inside," I said. "Give me 1 minute." The officer nodded. Double quotes, "Go ahead," he said. The HOA woman tried to stop me with pure audacity. "You can't walk away from this," she snapped. "This is an active violation." I didn't respond. I just walked into my house like a person walking into their own house, because I was. And behind me, I could still hear her talking, still spinning, still trying to control the outcome with volume. But once the officer asked, "Who owned the road?" it stopped being a performance. Now, it was an investigation inside. I went straight to the drawer with my closing packet. It wasn't color-coded. It wasn't pretty, but it was complete. The kind of folder you only appreciate when somebody tries to convince. Your property isn't yours. I carried it back out and set it on the hood of my car. The officer stepped closer. Denise leaned in too, like she expected to catch me lying. I flipped the packet open and pulled out the deed. Summary, legal description, parcel references. The officer scanned it fast. Then he looked at me. "You said you own the road?" he asked. I said, "I can show you what I own," I replied. Denise scoffed loudly. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. He doesn't own the road. Roads are community property." Officer ignored her and asked me, "Is this a private road?" "Yes," I said. Denise laughed, sharp and fake. "It is not private," she insisted. "It's maintained by the HOA." Maintained. She said it like it was a deed. And in that moment, I realized something. She probably believed that. Because HOAs do maintain roads sometimes. They patch, they plow, they repaint. And after enough years of that, board members start thinking maintenance equals ownership. But that isn't how land works. You can mow someone's lawn for 10 years. It doesn't make it yours. So I said it calmly to the officer. Maintenance isn't ownership. The officer gave a small nod like he agreed. Denise shot me a glare. "Don't lecture the officer," she snapped. The officer looked at her again. His tone changed slightly. "Warning now, ma'am. I need you to stop interrupting Denise." Opened her mouth, then closed it, because she was finally realizing something terrifying. The authority she thought she'd activated 911 wasn't here to enforce HOA rules. It was here to enforce law. And law doesn't care about board titles? The officer tapped the folder. "Do you have a survey?" he asked. "I do," I said. I pulled it out, folded, stamped, dated, a professional survey with boundary lines and a clear legend. I smoothed it flat on the hood with my palm. The officer leaned in. The tow driver leaned in too. Curious now, Denise leaned in like she was hunting for a loophole. I pointed at the boundary markings. "This is my parcel," said the officer, followed my finger. Then I pointed to the strip of roadway. "This road right-of-way is included," said it was deeded this way. Before the HOA existed. The officer's eyes narrowed slightly. Focus, he looked up at the street, then back down at the survey. Denise shook her head hard. "No," she said. "No, he's manipulating paperwork." Manipulating, that was her favorite word when she couldn't control the truth. The officer didn't react to her. He asked, "Do you have the plat map too?" I nodded, pulled it out. Older paper. Older formatting. But clearer than anything Denise had said all afternoon. It showed a separate tract designation. And it labeled the roadway in plain terms: private right-of-way, no city of, no county of, no HOA reference, just private. The officer exhaled slowly. Not dramatic, but now he was seeing what this really was. Not a fire lane issue, not community. Standard dispute caused by someone assuming authority where none existed. Denise shifted beside us. It's quieter now, but her anger sharpened into something desperate, because if the officer accepted this, her entire argument collapsed. Not just about my driveway, about her power. So she tried another angle. Well, she said quickly, voice tight, even if he owns part of it, there's an easement.
Oh, it has an easement.
The officer turned. To her, do you have the easement document? He asked. Denise froze again because it. People love the word easement because it sounds like a magic spell, but easements are specific. Recorded, filed, if you don't have it in writing. It might as well not exist. The officer watched her for a long beat, then turned back to me. Do you have county GIS proof? He asked a map. I can pull it up, I said. I opened my phone, pulled up the county GIS website, and typed in my address. The map loaded. Thin, clean parcel lines appeared. I zoomed in until it was undeniable. The roadway highlighted part of my parcel, not HOA common. Area, not municipal. Mine. The officer leaned closer. Even the tow driver leaned in. Then the officer straightened and looked at Denise. And I could tell he was choosing his next words carefully, because he wasn't just deciding what to do. He was deciding who needed to be corrected. Denise tried one last desperate swing. This is outrageous, she snapped. So you're saying the HOA can't enforce parking? People can just park wherever they want? Just pointed at the GIS boundary line and said the quiet sentence that ended her whole performance. I don't just own my driveway. The officer looked at me. I continued. I own the entire road right-of-way. Denise blinked hard. Her mouth parted slowly like her brain couldn't accept it. No, she whispered. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile. I just let the truth sit there in the open, solid and immovable. Because now the question wasn't whether I was parked properly. Now the question was, why had the HOA been acting like it owned something it didn't? The officer finally spoke, his tone flat and final. Ma'am, if he owns the road, you cannot tow his vehicle. He glanced at my driveway, and you cannot claim emergency violations on a private road unless there's an actual hazard. The face went red, hands clenched, and I could see it building that moment where she'd stop pretending this was about safety and reveal what it was really about, control. Because in her mind, the idea that I owned the road meant only one thing. She'd just called 911. On the wrong person, on the wrong property. And now she was standing there, exposed, caught between her own arrogance and a county map that didn't care how loudly she spoke. And as I watched her struggle to find a new argument, I knew the next phase was inevitable. Because when HOA people realize they've enforced rules with no authority, they don't admit it. They escalate. And Denise wasn't about to let go of that road without a fight. The officer didn't arrest anyone. He didn't lecture like a TV cop. He didn't raise his voice. He did the one thing that matters most when two sides argue about land. He restored the line between belief and reality. He looked at Denise and said, clear and final, ma'am. You can't call a tow truck for a vehicle parked on private property. If the road is deeded to him, you don't have enforcement authority. There Denise stood, frozen for a second, like the words didn't process, but the HOA, she started. The officer held up one hand. I'm not debating HOA rules, he said. I'm talking about ownership. This is private. The tow truck driver exhaled like he'd been holding his breath the whole time. He climbed into his cab without even looking at her. Denise whipped toward him. You can't just leave, she snapped. The driver cracked his window halfway and said something simple. Ma'am, I'm not losing my license because you're wrong. Then he rolled up the window and pulled away. Denise's jaw clenched as the truck disappeared down the road. Her eyes went to me next, not embarrassed, not reflective, furious like I'd humiliated her just by existing. The officer glanced at me and lowered his voice slightly. Sir, he said, if that road is deeded to you, you may want to consult an attorney. People get weird about private roads. I nodded. I will, I said. Then the officer turned back to Denise. Ma'am, he said, 911 is for emergencies. Don't do this again. She didn't answer. She just stared forward like her pride wouldn't allow her lips to move. The officer left. and the moment his patrol car turned the corner, Denise snapped back to life like a puppet whose strings had been tightened. "Oh, this is not over," she said loudly. "Not even close." I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because I could already feel it, that shift. The moment when an HOA stops pretending it's about safety, starts treating it like war. She walked away, tapping furiously on her phone, like she was writing my punishment in real time. And that night she did exactly what I expected. She buried me in paperwork. By the next morning, I had 6 emails from HOA compliance, not asking questions, not verifying ownership, just issuing directives. The subject lines alone told the story. Parking violation, urgent emergency access, obstruction known compliance notice board action, PND&G. They wrote like, authority existed because they typed it. So I did what I always do when someone tries to substitute volume for legality. I went quiet and I went formal. I printed my deed, my survey, and the county GIS overlay. Then I wrote a certified letter, not emotional, not snarky, structured like a real dispute notice at the top. My name and address, the HOA registered address, their violation reference numbers, then dispute of HOA enforcement, notice of private road ownership, demand for proof of a UTHY. The first paragraph was short. I dispute all violation notices. I dispute all fines. I demand immediate suspension of enforcement pending proof. Then the line that matters most. The road in question is privately deeded property. HOA enforcement does not apply. And I made it clear, not as a threat, just reality. Any future tow attempts will be treated as unlawful conversion of property and trespass. Attached exhibits. Deed showing right-of-way ownership survey map with boundary line GIS. Overlay screenshot officer's incident number. Then I mailed it certified with return receipt, because once an HOA is forced into certified mail territory, the tone changes. Not because they respect you, because they fear liability. Then I did the part that turns HOA confidence into panic. I requested records formally, by email and by mail. I requested towing agreements authorizing contractors to tow. On HOA roadways, enforcement logs related to parking, a HOA map exhibits showing jurisdiction, boundaries, meeting minutes where this road was designated a fire lane, any county filings or easement documents supporting HOA authority that last. One was the knife, because now they were trapped. Either they produced proof, or they proved they'd been bluffing at this point. I wasn't relying on my voice. I was building a wall of third-party confirmation, because HOAs are trained to dismiss homeowners as emotional. They can't dismiss county records. They can't dismiss surveyor stamps. They can't dismiss law enforcement reports. I went back to the county clerk's office and pulled the deed trail again. The clerk didn't care about HOA drama. She cared about records. She pointed at the chain and said that road's been deeded privately for a long time. Then I met with my surveyor. He confirmed it again in writing. Boundary confirmed, road right-of-way included in parcel description. HOA lots begin after the roadway segment und. I requested the incident report from the sheriff's office, not to weaponize. It did to document that 911 had been used as intimidation. The deputy IA spoke to didn't sound shocked. He sounded tired. HOA disputes, he said. We get them more than people think. Then he added, if it's a private road, the HOA can't enforce there. If they keep trying, keep reporting it. That's when it fully clicked for me. This wasn't misunderstanding. They knew enough to be dangerous, not enough to be right. And that combination always ends the same way, with collapse that weekend. I installed 2 signs at the entrance of the road. Nothing insulting, nothing aggressive, just factual. Private road, not a hoeing. Auto and Detroit beneath it. Authorized towing will be reported. Photograph the signs after installing them. Wide shots, close-ups. Timestamps, not paranoia. Process. Because process is what defeats overreach. 3 days later, the HOA responded, not with proof, not with easement documents, with accusation. A board hearing notice. It informed me I was required to appear. It said I was non-compliant. Hostile, interfering with emergency access, creating safety hazards, refusing lawful board directives, then the line that actually made me laugh once quietly, without humor. The board may seek an emergency injunction. An emergency injunction. A court order to turn my driveway into their jurisdiction, because I parked in my own driveway. Then later that night, got another email. One sentence, cold, threatening. Tow enforcement will proceed. I stared at the screen because now they weren't just arrogant. They were reckless. They'd been told by law enforcement. They'd been shown documents. They'd been warned in certified mail. And they were still pushing forward. That wasn't ignorance. Anymore, that was intent. I went to bed with my phone on the nightstand and my camera. Alerts active, not scared, prepared. Because HOA overreach is predictable. Once cornered, they try to win fast. They try to create a physical fact on the ground, something hard to undo. And at 2:12 a.m. my phone buzzed. Camera alert. Motion detected. Road entrances. Sat up instantly. Heart steady. I opened the camera feed. Headlights. A tow truck creeping down my private road in the dark, slow and quiet. Like a thief. Amber lights dimmed. Engine barely idling. The truck stopped. Near my driveway, the driver stepped out, hook chain rattling softly. He walked toward my car, and then, in the glow of the tow lights, I saw a second silhouette step out of. A car parked behind him. Lights off. A woman. Phone in hand, standing like she wanted to watch. Like she wanted. Footage. Like she wanted to win. Even through grainy night footage. I knew the posture, Denise, and in that moment, watching them attempt to tow my car off a road I legally owned, I realized something with cold clarity. The HOA wasn't just overreaching anymore. They were committing themselves on camera to something they could never talk their way out of, because now it wasn't a violation. Now it was action, and action creates consequences. And the consequences were about to land harder than any HOA fine ever could. At 2:12, that tow truck rolled down my road like it was sneaking into a driveway it had every right to access. I felt something I hadn't felt yet in this whole situation. Not fear, not anger, certainty. Because at that point, this wasn't Denise being annoying. This wasn't community standards. This was someone attempting to take my property, my vehicle, under the pretense of authority that didn't exist. And they were doing it in the dark, with cameras rolling, with a 911 incident already on record, with certified letters already delivered, which meant I didn't need to argue anymore. I needed to document. Stop the action, and then let consequences do what consequences always do. I slipped on a jacket, grabbed my phone, and stepped outside. The air was cold enough to sting, quiet enough to hear the tow chain rattling. My porch light cut a clean circle across the driveway as I walked down the steps. I kept my voice calm. "Hey," I called out. The tow driver froze. Mid-dash step. Denise didn't flinch. She just lifted her phone higher. Filming like she'd been waiting for this. The driver turned halfway toward me. "Sir, got authorization," he started. I held up my hand. "Stop," I said. Loud, just firm. Denise stepped forward, like she was supervising a crime. "You were warned," she said, sharp with satisfaction. "You've been non-compliant. This is enforcement." I looked at her evenly. "Denise," I said, "you called 911 on me for parking in my driveway." She scoffed. "And now," I continued, still calm, "you've brought a tow truck onto my private road at 2 in the morning." Her mouth tightened instantly. "It's HOA road." She snapped automatically. I didn't argue. I turned my phone screen toward the tow driver. County GIS map. Parcel lines. The road highlighted. Inside my property, then the survey stamp, then the certified letter copy. "Look," I said to him, not to Denise. "If you hook my vehicle, you're towing from private property without legal authority. I will file a report, and I will pursue damages. Your company will be named." The driver stared at the screen. You could see the calculation happen in real time. Tow drivers don't love HOAs. They love not getting sued. Denise tried to step in and override reality with volume. You don't have a choice, she snapped. You're contracted. The driver turned to her and cut it off. I'm not towing it, he said. Denise blinked, like betrayal was impossible. Yes, you are, she hissed. No, he repeated, sharper now. Not on a private road. Leaving. Denise's face flushed red. This homeowner is manipulating you, she snapped. This is obstruction. But the driver was already walking back to his truck. The tow rig backed up. Chains clinking as it rolled away down the road. Denise stood in the fading headlights, like she'd been abandoned mid-performance. The moment it was just the two of us on my driveway, cold air, late-night silence, her phone still filming. And her confidence suddenly unstable. Then she spit the next threat like it was instinct. Fine, she said. But then the board will take legal action. We'll get an injunction. You're going to regret this. I nodded once. Okay, I said. That confused her, because she still thought this was a power struggle. She didn't understand what she'd just handed me. Not just evidence. Intent. And intent is the part that turns. OA overreach into real liability. By 9 a.m., I'd done 3 things. I filed a report with the sheriff's office about the attempted tow. I sent my attorney everything, footage, timestamps, notices, and I drafted a formal trespass notice to the HOA. Not a warning, a notice, served 2 ways, certified. Mailed to the HOA, registered address hand-delivered to the management office with a signature receipt. The language was simple. No HOA board member, agent, contractor, or tow service is permitted to enter the privately owned road or driveway for enforcement purposes. Then I listed names, Denise's name included, because when someone abuses authority, you don't keep it vague, you make it specific. Then I did the most important part. I forbade the tow company. I sent the tow company owner the same documents and stated clearly the road is privateth. HOA has no jurisdiction. Any future tow attempt will be treated as unlawful conversion tow. Companies are not loyal to HOAs. They're loyal to avoiding lawsuits. And now they understood Denise could scream all she wanted. But touching my car would cost them real money. 2 days later, the HOA sent another violation letter, this time harsher. They called me uncooperative, threatening, interfering with association operations, endangering emergency access, but the letter contained one mistake that made me sit back in my chair. They wrote, "The HOA is responsible for maintenance of the road and will enforce rules accordingly." Responsible for maintenance. There it was again. The trick. The lie they'd gotten comfortable living inside. So, attorney replied with 1 page. Not emotional, not long, just clean reality. If the HOA believes it has authority over the road, it can do one of 2 things: produce proof of ownership or recorded easement, negotiate purchase or legal access through proper process. Because that's the truth. If you want control over land you don't own, you don't take it. You buy it. You negotiate. You pay. Denise wanted the benefits of ownership without the cost, and now she was being forced into daylight. The HOA scheduled another meeting. Denise titled it Community Safety, Emergency Access Compliance. Meeting. Fancy name for how do we punish the homeowner who embarrassed us. I attended calmly. This time I brought attempted tow footage, sheriff report number, county GIS printouts, survey stamp, certified mail receipts. Denise stood at the front. Like she owned the room? This homeowner wants to control the road, she announced. He wants to restrict community access. I didn't interrupt her. I let her speak because the more she talked, the more ridiculous she sounded. Then I stood and asked one question. Denise, I said calmly, if this road is HOA property, why do HOA board members park on it whenever they want? The room shifted. Denise froze. I continued evenly. Because I have photos, I said, of HOA leaders parking on this road overnight. During the same period, you threatened to tow me from my driveway. Then laughter, bitter laughter. Selective enforcement is what people tolerate, till they can see it. Denise raised her voice immediately. This is harassment. This homeowner is attacking the board. I didn't argue. I held up the photos. One board member's SUV, two neighbors parked along the road during HOA events, and Denise's own car half on curb, half on asphalt, exactly where she'd claimed emergency access was sacred. It wasn't. Petty? It was structural, because it proved what I'd said all along. This was never about safety. It was about control. Denise started shouting now, louder, less coherent. "This is out of control," she snapped. "You're undermining the community." I didn't raise my voice. I just said one sentence. "I'm undermining a lie." And that line landed hard, because it was true, and the room could feel it. Even the people who didn't like me couldn't ignore the facts. Denise called 911. On a homeowner in his driveway, Denise tried to tow a car at 2 a.m. from a private road, and now she couldn't produce proof of authority. That's what breaks systems, not anger, inability. Near the end of the meeting, someone approached me quietly from the side. Not Denise, not a board member, a longtime resident, older man, practical. Exhausted, he leaned close enough that only I could hear. And he said the sentence that changed everything. "Do you know the HOA has been collecting road maintenance fees for years?" He paused, eyes fixed on mine. "On a road they don't own?" My stomach tightened. Because suddenly this wasn't just about my driveway. This wasn't even just about Denise. This was about money. Years of money. Years of dues and budgets and maintenance allocation, collected under the assumption that the HOA owned something it never owned. And once that kind of lie gets exposed, the collapse doesn't stop with one board member. It spreads through the whole system. Because at that point, it isn't overreach anymore. It's misrepresentation. And misrepresentation doesn't survive daylight. Once the word fees entered the story, everything changed. Because people can tolerate HOA pettiness. They can tolerate threats. As long as they believe the HOA's power is just how things work. But the moment homeowners realize they've been paying money under false assumptions, that's when fear flips into fury. And it didn't take long. Within a week, the neighborhood message boards were lit up, not with gossip, with receipts, screenshots of fee statements, photos of violation, letters, snippets of the HOA budget that no one had ever bothered to read until now. Residents were doing what asks fear most. Paying attention, the board scheduled another special meeting. This time their email sounded different, softer, controlled. The subject line read, "Community Clarification Meeting, Road Safety and Financial Questions Clarification." In HOA language means, we're about to talk our way out of something. But when I arrived, I could tell immediately. They weren't going to talk their way out of this. The clubhouse parking lot was full. Not a few concerned residents. Full cars lined the curb all the way down the block like a school event. People walked in tight clusters, faces hard, holding folders and envelopes like they were heading into court inside. Every chair was taken. Residents stood in the back shoulder-to-shoulder. Wet boots squeaked on tile. The air smelled like coffee, damp jackets, and too many bodies. It's packed into one heated room. But what hit hardest was what people were holding. Violation letters, fee statements, printed, emails. Some held their documents up like protest signs, and the mood wasn't chaotic. It was focused. This wasn't a rant meeting. It was an accountability meeting. The board sat at the front table again. Denise was there. Of course she was, but she looked different, not smug, not righteous, rigid, like someone bracing for impact. Beside her sat a new man in a suit. HOA attorney, new. Attorney more polished. The kind of counsel you hire when the problem isn't a difficult resident. The problem is liability. Denise tapped the microphone at Scoot. She tapped it again, annoyed. Then she smiled like she was trying to convince everyone everything was fine. "Good evening," she began, voice controlled. "We're here to address some misunderstandings regarding road safety and association." A man in the second row stood up immediately. "No," he said loudly. "We're here because you called 911 on a homeowner in his driveway." The room murmured like thunder. Denise's face tightened, but she tried to keep control. "Please," she said. We're going to follow procedure. The attorney leaned toward the mic. Thank you, he said smoothly. There will be no interruptions. The board will address concerns in an orderly fashion. Orderly procedure, that old shield. But the residents weren't here to be managed. They were here to be answered. A woman in the back raised her fee statement like a weapon. Explain this, she shouted, another voice. Explain why we're paying road maintenance on something we don't. Own. Denise's smile faltered. Then she did what Denise always did when she felt control slipping. She tried to make me the villain. She pointed into the crowd. This homeowner has been spreading misinformation, she said sharply. He's attempting to claim control of the road. I stood up before she could finish. Not angry, not loud, just steady. No, I said calmly. I'm not claiming control. I'm showing ownership. That line landed clean, because it wasn't rhetoric. It was reality. The attorney raised his hand. Sir, this is not the forum, it is the forum, I replied. You're collecting money and threatening enforcement on land you don't own. The room surged in agreement, not cheering, just a low, angry hum. Denise's eyes flashed, but she couldn't stop me now, not with the room like this. So I walked to the front, not performing, not pushing past anyone, just moving like someone who came prepared. I placed my binder on the table, and I began in the only tone that works against authority theater, the tone of documentation. First I said, I'm going to address the 911 call. I held up a printed page. This is the call log. Incident number included, I said. 911 was called because I parked in my own driveway. Denise scoffed. Emergency access, she muttered. I didn't argue. I flipped to the next page. Second, I continued, the tow enforcement. I played the clip briefly on my phone. Tow truck rolling down my road at 2. A .m. driver stepping out. Tow chain rattling. Denise standing there filming. The room made a sound all at once, not a shout, not a boo, a low collective disgust. Because once people see it, they can't unsee it. A man near the wall said quietly, she tried to steal his car. Denise snapped her head around. That is not what happened. I looked at her evenly. You tried to tow it, I said. At 2 in the morning. After being told by police you had no authority, that forced silence into the room. The attorney jumped in, voice polished and controlled. We're not here to debate emotional interpretations, he said. We're here to address community expectations, and I slid a document across the table. No, I said calmly. We're here to address ownership. Then I held up the survey. This is the recorded survey, I said. Stamped and filed. It shows the entire road right-of-way belongs to my parcel. Another page. This is the deed language, legal description. The road is included. Then the county map overlay. And this is the county GIS parcel map, I said. The road is part of my property line. Denise looked like her jaw might crack, but the room didn't let her reframe it anymore. A woman stood, waving a printed HOA statement. Then why are we paying for road maintenance? She shouted. Another resident. Why do our dues include it? Another. Why? Did you tell us the HOA owns the road? The attorney leaned forward again, tone tightening. Please understand, he said. Road maintenance responsibility can be separate from road ownership. The room quieted, because that sounded reasonable. It was the kind of legal phrasing that calms crowds. So I stepped in immediately before that lie could settle. Correct, I said calmly. Responsibility can be separate from ownership. Attorney's eyes flickered. Annoyed, I didn't take the bait. But that means you cannot enforce parking as if you own it, he said. You cannot tow vehicles as if it's HOA common property. Maintenance doesn't grant enforcement authority. That's when the room shifted again from confusion into understanding, because everyone could feel the difference between responsibility and power. Then came the part that cracked the HOA wide open. Calvin stood up, the treasurer. He didn't walk to the mic like a politician. He stood where he was, pale, tense like a man deciding whether he could live with himself tomorrow. He cleared his throat, and then he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, we collected road maintenance fees under the assumption the association controlled road access. Silence. Total silence. That language wasn't opinion. That was accounting. Denise stared straight ahead. Calvin continued, voice shaking slightly now. That assumption was wrong. The woman whispered, "Oh my God." Calvin swallowed hard. "And I need to say this clearly," he added. "The board moved money and approved projects based on access through a road we do not own." The room erupted, not screaming. Demand? Like a dam breaking. Audit. Resign. Remove her. We want our money back. Denise finally snapped, losing her controlled tone completely. "This is chaos," she shouted. "This is exactly why you people shouldn't be allowed to derail meetings." That sentence was the last nail, because she didn't just insult me, she insulted the homeowners, the people paying dues, the people she claimed to represent. The attorney put his hand on her arm, trying to calm her. Denise yanked away, and everyone saw it clearly. Denise didn't care about safety, she cared about dominance, and now her dominance was turning into a legal problem. The attorney stood abruptly, louder now. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "we're taking a brief recess." Crowd booed. He raised his hand. "This is necessary," he said. "The board must confer with counsel." Denise's mouth moved like she was about to argue, but the attorney leaned in close, jaw tight, and whispered. Denise went silent instantly. 2 words. I didn't need to hear them. To no personal liability, they vanished through the side door. The room exploded into furious conversation the second they were gone, people calculating what they'd paid, what they might sue for, how long this had been happening. I remained seated, binder closed, because the evidence had done what it always does. It made denial impossible. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Then the side door opened again. The attorney returned first, but this time, Denise wasn't beside him. Her chair at the front table sat empty, and that detail hit the room like a shockwave. The attorney adjusted the microphone like he was preparing to deliver a statement, not participate in a meeting. He cleared his throat, then said calmly, "Effective immediately. Enforcement actions regarding parking and towing on the road in question are suspended." Murmurs. He continued, "The association will be commissioning an independent audit." More murmurs, louder now. Then he said the sentence that broke the last piece of Denise's authority. "And I will not be representing Ms. Hartley personally in any matter arising from these enforcement actions." The room went dead silent, because everyone understood what that meant. The HOA attorney, hired to dominate the room, had just distanced himself from Denise publicly. He didn't call her corrupt. He didn't call her wrong. He did something worse. He treated her like a liability, and in that moment, I knew the collapse had started for real. Not because the crowd was angry, but because truth had become expensive, and HOAs do not survive once the truth starts costing money. The meeting didn't end with applause. It ended with people talking in clusters, quiet and sharp, like a courtroom hallway after a ruling. Phones were out. Screens were glowing. Neighbors who'd never cared about HOA budgets a day in their lives were suddenly pulling up payment histories, asking each other what line items meant, asking who to call, asking how many years this had been going on. And Denise didn't speak again that night. She sat at the front table, stiff and silent, wearing that tight expression people wear when they're trying to pretend they aren't losing control in public. But control wasn't hers anymore. Not after. The attorney stepped away. Not after the treasurer admitted that assumption was false. Not after residents heard the words independent audit and realized the HOA wasn't just wrong. It was exposed, and the important part wasn't that the HOA lost a meeting, it was that the HOA lost its greatest weapon, the illusion that it was untouchable. 2 days later, a new letter arrived. Not an email blast, not a vague update. A formal notice sent by counsel. The subject line was the kind of language that makes HOAs tremble because it admits fault without saying the word. Notice of enforcement reversal in policy. Suspensione opened it slowly at my kitchen table with coffee in my hand. It's the same calm I'd carried through every step of this. The letter listed outcomes like a checklist. All violations rescinded, all associated fines withdrawn. All enforcement actions discontinued, all parking-related notices voided, and then, in plain terms, the association acknowledges it does not possess enforcement authority regarding parking on the privately deeded roadway in question. That was the sentence, the one they had fought so hard to avoid writing, because once it's written, it becomes a permanent record, not gossip, not opinion, a concession. I read it twice, then set it down, and sat there quietly for a moment, not celebrating, just absorbing, because it still felt surreal that all of this started with me parking in my own driveway. Within the week, residents received a short, cautious update. Towing contract suspended, pending review. Suspended. It's not canceled. That's what HOS say when they don't want to admit they were using towing like a weapon, but the tow company didn't wait for their wording. Got a call from the tow company owner himself. Not angry, not defensive. Practical, double quotes, sir. Said, I'm calling to confirm. We're not touching anything on that road ever again. That's correct, I said. He paused, then added, We've removed the HOA from our service schedule entirely. That was his way of saying, your HOA is too risky to deal with. Tow companies don't want drama. They want legal clarity. And Denise had dragged them into something that smelled like lawsuits, so they ran quietly immediately. A week later, the HOA attorney sent another document. This one wasn't a notice. It was an agreement. A written acknowledgement that HOA authority stopped where my land began. It included no future enforcement regarding driveway parking, no towing authorization on the road, no HOA patrol activity, no emergency access, enforcement except through county authorities, and the part I cared about most, the association agrees to cease direct contact with homeowner regarding road disputes except through counsel. In other words, Denise wasn't coming back with a clipboard. No more phono-face filming. No more performing authority on land she didn't own. From that point forward, if the HOA wanted to speak to me, it would have to do it like adults. Through a lawyer. With evidence, that's the only language overreach truly respects. Then came the issue they couldn't gloss over. The road maintenance fees once that truth came out. Residents didn't calm down. They got organized. People compared dues, statements, and found the same language repeating across multiple years. Road maintenance allocation, reserve contributions for road resurfacing, service route improvements. Those words didn't sound like neighborhood upkeep anymore. They sounded like misrepresentation. The HOA tried to soften it with careful language. Community credit adjustment will be applied to future statements. But homeowners weren't satisfied. Someone asked the question every HOA hates hearing. If you collected fees for something you didn't own, what else have you collected money for under false assumptions? And that's when the board did what boards always do when pressure tightens. They offered a resolution, not called a settlement. Because HOAs don't like legal words, but it was a settlement in everything but name. Credits applied, certain fees reclassified, road-related reserve line items removed going forward, budget rewritten to match actual jurisdiction. Residents accepted it, not because they trusted the HOA again, but because the audit was already coming, and everyone knew it. The independent audit. This began quietly. No public shaming, no dramatic announcements, just professionals reviewing line items and approvals. But it had an immediate effect. The HOA stopped acting like a bully overnight, because once auditors are involved, every petty enforcement action becomes dangerous. And then, a month later, the board sent out one final update that said everything in a single sentence. Board member Denise Hartley has resigned, effective immediately. That was all. No defense, no explanation, no explanation, no tribute, just removed. And it didn't feel like justice. It felt like what really happens when the truth shows up and someone abuses power until they become a liability. The system discards them. Denise wasn't dragged through the mud. She wasn't humiliated theatrically. She was reduced to something simpler. A person who confused authority with ownership, and got corrected by documentation. The HOA also made structural changes, not because it suddenly developed morality, because it was now under scrutiny. They implemented clear boundary disclosure for every homeowner, updated maps in the HOA portal, a policy requiring proof of jurisdiction before enforcement, limits on towing authority, limits on calling law enforcement for compliance issues. Sign went up at the entrance. Not aggressive, not personal, just factual. Private road, not HOA. Property not unauthorized. POWING 4 years. The HOA lived in ambiguity. Now it was forced into clarity, and clarity is deadly to overreach. A few weeks later, I pulled into my driveway at the same time of day as the original incident. Sunlight slanted, crossed the road, birds were out. Someone in the distance was watering their lawn. The neighborhood felt normal again, but not the old normal. A quieter, healthier normal where people weren't so eager to let one person's authority become everyone else's reality. I parked, turned off the ignition, and sat there for a moment with my hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. No adrenaline, no tension, just stillness. Then I stepped out and looked down the road. My road, the asphalt wasn't perfect. It was older in places, patched in others, but it felt different now, not because it changed physically, because the truth about it was now public. Boundaries were clarified, power was limited, and the HOA had been forced to remember something it should have always respected. A title isn't ownership, a rule book isn't law, a board member isn't a government. I walked toward my front door slowly, not feeling victorious, feeling resolved. Because this wasn't won through rage, it was won through process, through documentation, through truth. And that's the moral I carry now, is quietly, without needing to turn it into a speech. Don't fight entitlement with anger. Fight it with records. Because overreach thrives in confusion, but it collapses the moment it meets a boundary, clearly documented, calmly enforced, and impossible to erase.